The oldest and strongest human emotion is fear, and the oldest and strongest type of fear is trepidation of the unknown. When we were children, our parents told us that monsters didn't exist, but we were sure that something was lurking under the bed or in the closet. Fear sees, even if our eyes are closed. Welcome to the realm of the arcane. My name is Lon Strickler. Join me as I examine unexplained creatures, strange manifestations, and remarkable realities. Imagine this next hour as a voyage of discovery to strange lands, seeking not for new territory, but for new knowledge of the supernatural. Come on board as we begin this adventure together. Hey folks, good evening and welcome to another episode of Arcane Radio, where we explore the unexplained live on Beyond Explanation. I'm your host, Lon Strickler, coming to you from the spectral shadows of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I want to welcome our listeners in the UK and in Europe, and hope you can join us continuously. Now, before we start the show and before I introduce my guest, I want to run a video of something I found this week. Now, apparently, this short video was recorded by a YouTuber in Poland who apparently had been hearing these snarling sounds emanating from the woods around his farm. Now, I ran this video through the CGI software, and there seems to be no digital changes or deception. And go ahead, you take a look at some of the screens captures that are coming up there now. I imagine this is probably a pale humanoid that people have been describing. They have all kinds of names for it: the rake, fleshgate, crawler. There was a previous video made months before this one where this individual who had was in his barn and heard these sounds again, but he wasn't able to capture this being on the video, but he got the sounds, the same type of snarling. So I don't know what this is. I completely leave this up for your determination, but I think it's kind of interesting. We occasionally will get something like that. If you go to one of the videos that we put up on Beyond Explanation that's titled Penelope. Penelope is a humanoid-like creature that has been seen in the Sierra Nevadas over the past several years. And I think I have 3 sightings on that video. And I have actually talked to 2 rangers in that area where these sightings have been happening, and they verified it. They verified people have been seeing this thing. So, that might give you a pretty good idea of what people are experiencing. So I thank you for watching, and if you have any comments, send them to me or send it to my email at lonstrickler@famsofmonsters.com. So tonight, I welcome well-known Scottish paranormal live streamer Kev Baker to Arcane Radio. Now, Kev is based in Glasgow, Scotland, and is the host of the popular podcast, The Kev Baker Show, on Truth Frequency Radio. He also has his KBS channels on YouTube. Now, Kev covers everything from geopolitics to exopolitics on his own show, and has a long-time interest in the paranormal. Having been brought up in Fort Augustus on the southern end of Loch Ness, Kev is uniquely placed to talk about Loch Ness Monster and other incidents of high strangeness in the Highlands of Scotland. So, Kev, thanks for taking the time and staying up to join me this evening.
Oh, Lon, it's a pleasure to come and join you on your show. You've been very gracious with your time, your information, coming onto my show with Bill Bean as well. And I'm really looking forward to getting into some Scottish woo with you, brother.
It sounds good. That's what we're into.
Yeah.
So I guess the monster in the room, so to speak, is the Loch Ness Monster, Nessie. So you being raised on the loch, first of all, have you ever seen it, or what association or what interest have you had in this phenomenon?
Well, like I explained to you before we came on air, growing up there, you don't truly appreciate what's on your own doorstep. Having moved away later on after I left school, went to the army, now down in Glasgow, I do see the appeal of the loch. I do see the attraction now. But when I was growing up there, I always had it in the back of my mind that we were dealing with some kind of plesiosaur, the long neck, the flippers, the kind of dinosaur-looking monster that a lot of people associate with the loch. Over the years, though, I have changed my opinion on that. And I think that we're looking at something as weird and as bizarre as Skinwalker Ranch over in the US, because it's not just one type of entity. It's not just this one cryptid you get appearing there, Lon. There's various descriptions of the same water entity. Then you've got stories about Bigfoot, other creatures around the loch. And I don't think we can get away from the fact that Aleister Crowley, everyone's heard of him, right? And he selected Loch Ness and Boleskine House out of anywhere in the world. He's a very rich man. But when he decided he was going to open a portal, he specifically chose Loch Ness and Boleskine House to do it. And I think there was a reason for that. I can't ever prove it, but I speculate that that area in the Highlands, for whatever reason, maybe ley lines, I don't know, Lon, but it's almost like a natural vortex, a natural portal. And it's not the same as Skinwalker Ranch, but it's similar because there's high strangeness of various degrees.
What you talk about is very similar to what Nick Redfern and I had discussed several times. He believes Crowley may actually have been involved with some of the sightings. I mean, as far as maybe opening up a portal. He has other theories as well, but he feels very strong about Nessie actually being a supernatural being that's possibly coming through some type of interdimensional portal. What are your thoughts on that?
I am a big fan of Nick Redfern, absolute legend. I love reading what he has to say about Loch Ness, and I think we're dealing with something very specific, and it's called a Kelpie. Now, if you look at what a Kelpie is, that is a shape-shifting water entity, and it's found in and around the lochs, or as you guys would call it, the lakes of Scotland. It's not just Loch Ness that has a kind of Nessie story attached to it. We've got Loch Mora as well, Morag, that's the name of the monster there. And the reason I think it's this entity, Lon, is that one of the characteristics of the Kelpie is that it's a shapeshifter. And it's often depicted as a horse. So we've had loads of sightings that you'll be familiar with. We've got the old surgeon's photo, whether it was fake or real, everyone can picture that. We've seen the humps. We've seen various photos of something in the loch over the years, but my family if I take you back to around the time of World War One. One of my relatives was involved in a very famous sighting indeed, and we only found out it was a famous sighting recently because my brother started to track back the family tree, and he came across old newspaper cuttings of the sighting that my family, we always tell this story. And the story, as I remember it when I was growing up, was that my great-great-grandfather, probably another great on the top of that, going fishing, going playing one day. I remember it was going to work, but it turns out they're a lot younger. But they were down at the mouth of the loch, and what they seen was a horse-like figure coming down off the hill. Then it had just walked straight into the water and continued down until it submerged into the water. So here we have something completely different. We have this on land entity going into the water, and then you've got all the various monster sightings, long neck, no long neck. My mum's, she's seen something. It was like, she described it as like a whale, something large under the water, no big humps. So I think the way that you can bring all of these various descriptions together is if we're potentially dealing with a shape-shifting paranormal entity. And if it's Scotland, I'm going to go for the Kelpie. Definitely one.
That's interesting. I don't really believe I've ever heard that theory before. Though, when you hear about the Kelpie, you think about this horse-shaped cryptid or shapeshifter or whatever that people would jump on top of and go into the lake or the water and drown on top of this creature. I mean, that's what it's supposedly, the lore behind it, the legend behind it.
I'll give you a description here. This comes from Historic UK. It says a Kelpie is a shape-shifting aquatic spirit of Scottish legend, and its name may derive from the Scottish Gaelic words Kelpich or Colpich, meaning heifer or colt. And Kelpies are said to haunt rivers and streams, usually in the shape of a horse. And I know it might be a stretch for some people out there to say, well, that's not the Loch Ness Monster, Kev.
Mhm.
But this is a shape-shifting entity. Maybe it takes various forms, Lon.
Mhm. Yeah. Now, if you go back to the history of, supposed history of Nessie, this goes back to the Irish Saint Columba, and apparently he had threatened this beast to not hurt or attack an individual. Do you know this?
He had sent one of his hands across the loch to fetch a boat, and on his way across the loch, he was met by this great Leviathan type monster, and the priest prayed it down, calmed it down, subdued it. Now, I get what people are going to say. They're going to say, well, that's a really convenient way to scare the life out of people and to get them to turn away from their druidic Pictish way and come to Christianity. I totally appreciate that. I'm not naive. There certainly could be an element to that.
Mhm.
I also sent you something today, an image of a carving on a stone that was found by Loch Ness near Uckert Castle. And what you see on this stone that you're looking at here, it's something very serpent-like at the top. And there's a line going through the middle of it. And then at the bottom, you've got two interconnecting circles. Now, the Picts, they were always drawing circles within circles. But I think the interesting thing is the snake-like creature. Scotland is not known for any crazy snakes, Lon. It's not like we're stepping over snakes everywhere we go. So what was it they were trying to depict? If you look at that stone slightly in a different way, you see a long neck, and then you see a hump above the line. And I was wondering, I was thinking to myself, I wonder if that's meant to be the surface of the water.
That's what I would think.
Yeah. So the Picts, before St. Columba got there, they were already leaving messages in stone about something significant enough, Lon, to go and carve this magnificent piece of work here, you know?
Mm. Where was this found at, you know?
It's a place called Balnahan House, and it's near Drumnadrochit.
Oh, I know where you're talking about.
Yeah, it's right. Everyone thinks of the castle on Loch Ness. That's Uckert Castle. That's
Mm.
Drumnadrochit right there. And
Okay.
then the stone was just at one of the houses on the banks of Loch Ness. And as I was telling you before the show, there's a strong Pictish connection up there with Clava Cairns.
Right.
A lot of people listening probably watched the TV show Outlander, and
Hmm.
they've got the stone in that. It's a Stargate. But, well, that's maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes drive from Loch Ness. But one of the things that most people don't know about Loch Ness is that not only does it have a monster in there, allegedly, but did you know, Lon, that there are concentric stone circles 70 feet below the surface of Loch Ness?
I
And they
never
were
heard that.
discovered. No, I only it was thanks to Nick Redfern actually that I heard about this. It was a MIT professor called Marty Klein. He was the inventor of the side scan sonar. He helped
Hmm.
find the Titanic, things like that. And when he went looking for the loch, and it was an MIT study that was done in the 70s, they seen a couple of interesting things. They got photographs, but the thing that blew everyone away was something that went on to be called Klein Henge. And like I say, 70 feet below the surface, you had 4 or 5 massive stone circular monuments, very similar to what is nearby at Clava Cairns. Now, that hints that way back in the day, then, around the 5th, 6th AD, that the level of the loch was substantially lower.
Hmm.
And there was obviously human activity that is now underwater. But you know what's really strange about that story, Lon? You would think all of the locals would know about the occasion when an American team of scientists came to the loch in 1976. It was the year I was born. It was a record hot summer that year. So it was already a summer that stood out. No locals have any idea. Everyone I speak to, they've got no idea what I'm talking about when I tell them about Klein Henge. Now, that for me just adds a level of weirdness to it because it's a small community up there. And you
Mm.
would imagine if this had been a story at the time, and I'm not saying it wasn't a story at the time, but for some reason, it got downplayed when the information went to the University of Edinburgh. And when the scientists from MIT went home, all talk of any stone circles in Loch Ness was clamped down on. It just disappears. Nobody
Hmm.
seems to want to talk about it. It's a weird one.
Yeah, it is unusual.
Yeah, but that was
Uh,
Nick Redfern. Big shout out to Nick. He had wrote about that, and that's how I found out about it.
Bill, if you'd put that photo back up again, if you look below the serpent, and the two circles connected, that almost looks like a wormhole to me.
Yeah, I mean, I often look at these pictograms and things like that, petroglyphs,
Yeah.
and it does. You can definitely see a portal type. Our minds think portal one. Whether the Picts were depicting a portal or not, it's for our interpretation, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I had never seen that before.
You see, I think you put all of these things together, and remember, Aleister Crowley was like reading manuscripts and books that the general public we don't get access to.
Right.
So potentially, and again, it's speculatory, but potentially he read about some ancient knowledge, some ancient information about perhaps a known portal up in that area. And if you're going to do a magic working where you're trying to open a portal, I don't know, I'm not a master magician, but that'd be the perfect place to go, right?
Well, I tell you, if anybody has watched, like you said, Outlander, I mean, you've got the portal in the stone circle and other odd things going on where she travels back in time. And, the whole show itself, just like the Culloden scene, that fascinated me. And I have heard for years about Culloden. For those who don't know where Culloden is, it's just east of Inverness, which is the northern part of the
You could
loch.
draw a triangle between Loch Ness, Culloden, and Clava Cairns, where the standing stones are.
Is that right?
Yep, yep.
Hmm.
But Culloden battlefield, that's like Gettysburg, I would imagine.
Yeah.
It's a feeling. It's just an atmosphere, even to this day.
Everybody who I have talked to who has been there has been greatly affected by it. The energy there is like they state, and like I feel when I go to Gettysburg, it's palpable.
Yeah.
There's people hear things. I know the one monument, the tower monument that's there. People hear voices and such there, and a lot of other strange phenomena. Basically, the place is the battlefield itself was a moor, wasn't it?
Yeah, just a big long field, and there's the reports of people hearing like the battle is still going. People they report smelling, the smells.
Mm-hmm.
It's yeah. I wonder what causes that, Lon. I think all of that trauma, all that bloodshed in one location in a short
Yeah.
period of time, it scars the place, doesn't it?
Yeah, I tell you, like I have talked about so many times before, with my experiences at Gettysburg, it's and I've been to other battlefields where I've experienced it as well. I mean, Tiedemann, especially because of the large amount of death that occurred there. These places get imprinted, and I mean for many centuries. Now, Culloden that was back in the 18th century, and with the Jacobites fighting the British, and the amount of death and destruction that was caused there, I'm quite sure imprinted the whole area.
Yeah, Fort Augustus, there's the King's Inn bed and breakfast, and that's where
Mm-hmm.
Bonnie Prince Charlie actually hid.
Okay.
When he was on his way, when he was on the run. So you've got a lot of history up there, as well as the Loch Ness thing going on. Hauntings. You've got people that partake in Ouija boards, and it goes crazy, totally crazy. And now you've got the whole spectacle of Boleskine House being turned into a spiritual retreat, where the teachings of Aleister Crowley are allegedly going to be taught again. Rituals will be carried out,
I read that recently.
The locals are up in arms, and then
Really?
the people that are restoring the property, the Boleskine Foundation, they made a big song and dance about how we're nothing to do with Aleister Crowley. We just want to restore this once great Edwardian property that's it's once glory. All right, fair enough. But then you find out that one of the people on the Boleskine Foundation board, he's written books about Aleister Crowley.
Right.
So, and I think the locals, because there's still you've got the Free Presbyterian Church up there, still quite religious for the times we're living in now, Lon, when I think about it. And they're obviously, they're up in arms. So, yeah, we'll see how this goes. But not one, but two fires at Boleskine House. So,
really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the time when Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin owned the place, and I guess they had a retreat there occasionally, but there was a lot of controversy about that as well.
Yeah, a couple of people that owned that, they took their own lives. I was reading about that not long ago, actually. But I went there with my brother and our friend. It was 2016, just after the first fire. We went in there like, I don't know, Zach Bagans, Ghost Hunters or something, charging in there. We thought we knew what we were doing, calling out spirits, and You know, Lon, within 6 months of me, my brother, and my friend doing that, all three of us, I had a couple of heart attacks. Kenny had something going on with his health. My friend had something with his health as well. And not even just our group, because other groups that went there, um, they all had like, I don't want to call it a curse, but there was like bad luck, bad juju attached itself to people that was going near that property. Now, I know people might say, "Oh, come on, Kev, that's just your own imagination." But it could very well be. However, you can't get away from the fact that the other thing that we all have in common, apart from having an imagination, is that we all went to Boleskine House. So, I don't know. Make of
Well,
it what you will.
I have talked about psychic attacks and, you know, people being having attachments from, you know, places like where there's lots of different energies, and I'm quite sure the energy there isn't the greatest. And I guess if you perturb the spirits, and I don't believe in going into a place and start calling out and
It was
agitating
crazy, Lon. I look
energy.
back now and I'm thinking, what on earth? Do you know?
Yeah,
And that's I ended up having to get Bill to do a kind of deliverance for me,
yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah, that changed a lot of things, I must admit. But to anyone out there, I wouldn't tell anyone what to do. But you know, like Lon says, you can't go into these places just half baked. You got to really be prepared, and if you can, just don't, just don't.
Yeah,
Mm.
it normally causes problems. You
Never
know,
a good story at the end of it, Lon, right?
it's like when people this is what gets me. This is like when people will come to me and say, "Look, I have an attachment. I know I've got an attachment. I don't know where I got it from." And the first thing I ask them is, you do paranormal investigations, don't you?" Yeah. Why? How you know that?" Well, you know, the problem was you didn't protect yourself. And, you know, these people that go into cemeteries and stuff and start calling on the spirits and are into a well known location that's haunted and start, you know, stirring the pot, that's going to lead to problems. I've seen it so many times.
Yeah.
You know, quite honestly, and I joke about it, but it's not funny. I say half the people who have come to me about either attachments or having issues are somebody that's involved with the paranormal.
Well, you know, funny you should say that again. Shout out to Nick Redfern. But he had kind of taken a look at, I think it was the black eyed kid phenomenon.
Hmm.
And one thing that all of the victims had in common, or all of the witnesses had in common, was they had either recently got into the occult or the paranormal, or they already had a long time interest in it.
Hmm.
So it wasn't something new to them. And I kind of think it's like, don't stick your head too far above the trenches, because you must be like a beacon, like a light in that spiritual realm, and you're
Yeah,
just inviting them towards you, you know?
yeah, you know, it does attract problems. That's for sure. Yeah, what you tell me there, that doesn't surprise me at all. You know, that's what's interesting about well, you know, Great Britain, England, countries of Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. You have all these areas that have seen a lot of activity for many centuries, you know, and even you know millennia. And I, you know, people talk about things that happen in these areas, just like Scotland and England. Well, there's no wonder. I mean, there's just so much energy there, so much history. We know most of the history. We don't know all of it, but we know some of it, and a lot of it wasn't good. You know, so
It's
I
like
mean,
I was
anywhere
saying to
between
you,
plagues and famine and everything else and wars, there's a lot of imprints and there's a lot of energy floating around.
big time, big time. It's like I was saying to you as well. Different attitude on this side of the pond. When it comes to the reporting of some of these stories, when it's the Bigfoot or Loch Ness monster or something like that. And I was telling you just recently we had another Loch Ness monster sighting, and I've got a couple of photos. Well, I've got another photo we can take a look at in a moment of one of the better sightings, I think. But then we had a guy that allegedly saw a Bigfoot up near Inverness as well, near Culloden, actually. And he got hit by a fish. And that was in the local media. That made it into the news. And that's what I was saying to you before the show, isn't it? It's, we just kind of talk about it. We take it for granted. It's just a part of life here. And it's just an everyday occurrence because we've got this big, long history. We've got all these things going on. And over in America, it doesn't really work like that. It's not the same attitude at all, Lon, is it?
No. You know, our history is, you know, of course, there were indigenous people before us, but our known history is only several centuries, and that's it. And, you know, we can understand when we go to battlefields or places where there were, you know, lots of death and such, you know, we can understand the energy being there. But as where you are, it's just so much that, you know, you people that aren't from there don't really understand it. You know, you talked about, and I tell you, you talked about Bigfoot, and you said around Culloden and around Inverness. You know, if there is a Bigfoot in Scotland or in the British Isles, if there is a Bigfoot, there's no doubt to me that it would be attracted to areas like Culloden or Loch Ness, or areas where there is a lot of spirit energy. You know, people talk about cryptids here in the United States and North America that seem to be attracted to cemeteries, seem to be attracted to areas where there has been death, or areas where there is lingering energy. I get reports about that all the time. Now, if you're looking into what's going on over there, if they are these cryptids in Scotland or the British Isles, why would it be any different? Why would they not be attracted to these areas?
A very good point. And I was saying to you as well, usually the big cats, that's our usual kind of thing that gets spotted all the time.
Yeah.
But that Bigfoot, the alleged Bigfoot sighting, that really caught my attention because here we had a guy, he lives right on the edge of this wooded area that he went into. He knows all the noises, he knows his way about the place. He's not an idiot. And then all of a sudden, whack, right in the back of the head, looks round and there's like a salmon at his feet. Now, the sea's way, the Murray Firth is way off.
Mhm.
So when he turns round, he also says that he's seen something about 7 or 8 feet tall, but just dark and moving away in the opposite direction. This is a guy, he describes himself as not being into things like Nessie, not being into the paranormal. But at the end of the day, what he's seen was a 7 or 8 foot tall, dark figure. And that he's seen it immediately after he got hit in the back by a salmon. I know it's funny. It's funny, but they're trying to explain it away as well. Maybe an osprey dropped a fish on your head. He said, well, maybe it did, but that doesn't explain the 7 or 8 foot tall thing I seen going into the bushes. So I don't know what was going on there at all.
You know, that's interesting. That kind of reminds me a bit about the big gray man of Ben McDoy, you know, with the legend. Is it a legend or is it actually a Bigfoot like creature? I mean, who knows? But this supposed shadow, or maybe a spirit, or maybe it is corporal. I don't know. But that story fascinates me. I mean, is it this mountain spirit that manifests occasionally when a man or someone goes into its area? I don't know, but it's a great story. And you know, ever since I have heard that, I mean, I really I don't have much doubt now that there are what maybe people called years and years ago as feral wild men or something in Scotland or in Great Britain. I mean, over the past few years, we've been having more and more people citing supposed Bigfoot-like creatures in the Great Britain. So I don't know. I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, I know them. to be honest, up until a couple of years ago, I had no idea that there was a UK Bigfoot community.
Mm-hmm.
They call them the wild men over here, kind of more commonly.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's an Irish Bigfoot Association. I seen them getting interviewed on a show last weekend. To be honest, Lon, I had no idea the frequency at which people do report these type of entities in the UK. And when you look at the UK geographically, the environment, for me, it's like the Pacific Northwest, and that's somewhere where the Bigfoot hangs out. Lots of trees here, lots of hills, lots of lakes. It would be perfect. So I don't see why we wouldn't expect to see the Bigfoot here.
You know, the climate in the Pacific Northwest is very similar
Yeah.
to the climate in Great Britain, and especially up north where you're at.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, you know, I don't know. You know,
We've got the mountains as well. We've got the Cairngorms,
sure.
Monroes. They're over 3,000 feet. So you look at over the Himalayas, you've got the Yeti. So you find these things in mountainous regions. Now there is a couple of stories about something, obviously on the Cairngorms, whether that is a Bigfoot or something different. I don't know. I'm kind of up in the air. I can go either way on that. But we've also got lots of other things that happen over here as well, hunting wise. Story I've told a few times, but I'm sure it'll blow you away. And it goes back to like World War II this time. And it was a local dance in one of the village halls. And everyone knows everyone else up there, Lon. And it's all kind of different time back in the 50s. You know, a bit more gentlemanly and ladylike. And you'd ask somebody to the dance, or you'd have the women on one side of the hall, the men on the other. And it was very kind of classy affair. And then there was this gentleman, this stranger that was at the dance this night. And he was in the full kind of Highland dress. He had the kilt on, looking absolutely phenomenal. All the women in the hall, they were all falling over themselves because here's a gorgeous piece of fresh meat in the village, basically. All the guys, they were wanting to fight one because all the girls were looking at him. But long story short, one of my grand's friends got dancing with this guy. And everything was going great. Everything was perfect. She was obviously over the moon. Here she was with the catch of the night. And then the band stopped playing and the dance finished. And that's when it all went horribly wrong because the lights went on. When the lights went on, he looked at her and she looked at him. And the way my mum and my gran told the story was, she doesn't know why, but she felt she had to look down. And when she looked down, the dude she'd been dancing with had cloven feet and legs like an animal. Now, that sounds like a story, but I've seen people that were either witness to that or had been told it firsthand. And my mum talks about this as well, because that story to this day, it still affects people because something real happened that night, Lon. I don't know what it was, but something real happened. And then the weirdest part to tie it all back into Loch Ness is that one show I was doing, I was diving really deep into the whole Kelpie lore. And it talked about how on rare occasion it can take human form. And often when it takes human form, it has cloven feet. So I don't know. Make of it what you will.
That's interesting.
Very.
But when you're talking about Scotland, you're going to come up. You got to come up with a great legend, even if it's just a personal legend.
Exactly.
You know, you were talking about the big cats. Now, you know, there's been talk about these big cats in Great Britain for, well, since the 70s. You know, when the wildlife law was passed, when people who had these large big cats for pets, unfortunately, they had to start paying a tax to keep them, and people were letting them go. And eventually, it turned out that these big cats found a way to survive in the wild. And no, I have talked to people who have seen these things, and these things are out there. In fact, I knew somebody in Wales lived near the Carmarthen, and it was on a farm, and she literally saw a black cat grab a sheep and take it over a fence. I thought, well, geez, I mean, are you sure that's what you saw? And said, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I've heard a lot of different
Yeah, I
things,
heard
but
of
they're
pumas.
there.
You get the jaguars. Um, like you said, I think a lot of these things probably got a foothold in the wild when people threw them away, when they couldn't afford to keep them anymore. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, as opposed to the Bigfoot stories, I would say it's more common to hear about big cats. But then, that's not to say that in local media, there aren't these reports of the Bigfoot. That's the great thing nowadays, Lon, with the internet, that we're able to get these reports from all around the world that perhaps 20, 30 years ago, they would have just remained little stories in the local area, and we didn't
Mm-hmm.
have a chance to put them all together.
Well, unfortunately for us over here, we don't get the press that you guys get over there, unfortunately, because it's very few and far between when there's a Bigfoot story or a decent UFO story in our press.
Most
And
of the
most of the time, when
UFO,
there is, they're going to ridicule it. So,
yeah, most of the UFO stories now are all wrapped up and handed to you by the Pentagon, right? That seems to be the way it goes.
yeah, I've got my own thoughts about that. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't,
we've got
why
another
they're
show on
doing
that.
it. Are they trying to appease certain people, spoon feed us a case here or there? You don't see them talking about alien beings yet, though, do you?
Well, the ex-space security chief of
Mm,
Israel, he came out the other day. Now, granted, he's also releasing a book, but he is talking about how Israel and the US have been in contact with something called the Galactic Federation for a while. Now, the
hmm
reason I laugh, the reason I kind of snickered there is because there's some wackier realms of ufology that have come to life with the internet age.
Sure.
And some of the wackier end of the Galactic Federation and Blue Chickens and things like that, it does tend to make me smile. So I don't know what this Israeli cat's game is, but Paul Hellyer, he's the ex-defense
Right.
minister from Canada. He talks about it. Maybe somewhere, maybe our Sky brothers and sisters have said, maybe it's time, Lon. Maybe they're going to tell us at long last. I wouldn't believe anything they tell us, but maybe, I don't know.
Well, I mean, and I wrote about it in my book. I mean, I was abducted, and I was shown some pretty bizarre things that, historical ones that, they aren't really explainable, but when you start thinking about it, maybe there's something to this. But you know, I talking about Scotland and UFOs and abductions and such. There is one case that I'm interested. Well, there's two cases actually. The Detchmont Woods encounter and also the A70 abduction. Are you aware of those two?
No, I'm not, Lon. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not. Tell me more, man. I'm intrigued.
Well, the Detchmont case was back in. I have to pull it up here, but let's see here. Nah, I don't have it right now. But you know what? What I'm going to have to do, I'll send them to you.
Please do. Yeah.
I'll send you. Yeah, I'll send you the
Yeah.
cases. There's. I was trying to figure out and try to remember cases that I had heard from Scotland, and they're not a whole lot. I mean, not like it is down in Wales or
We've got a designated dark area in Scotland at Falkirk.
right.
Funnily enough, Falkirk's where we have big, massive statues of kelpies.
Yeah.
It's a designated dark zone for UFO hunters. It's like a little hotspot, Bonnie Bridge. That's a
hmm
kind of UFO hotspot in the UK. But as for abductions or things like that, it's not. I can't think of any that spring to mind. To be honest with you, it's not
Mm.
a major thing, but maybe it is. Maybe people just don't talk about that.
Yeah, the Dexmont Woods encounter was a UFO encounter, and it was back in, oh God, I think it was back in the '60s, and then the A-70 abduction was a little bit later. I've got them. I will send them to you so
Awesome.
you can, yeah, you can read about them. When you think Scotland, or when I think Scotland, because I'm a history buff. But when I think Scotland, I think Templars, Rosslyn
Mm.
Chapel, the mysteries of Rosslyn Chapel, the Sinclairs, possibly Oak Island connected
Oh,
and
now we're
such.
talking, Lon. Now we're talking.
What's your whole take on that?
Funnily enough, 44 years old, and I only went to Rosslyn Chapel maybe about a year ago.
Oh,
That was
really?
the first time I've ever been there. Now that is a special, special place. It sells itself, obviously, with the history, the lore.
Hmm.
But like we said with Loch Ness, with Culloden, with Gettysburg, obviously different situation here, but there's a physical atmosphere. You're in the presence of something pretty magical. And when we were in there, some of the architecture, the stonemasonry, you have to be up close and personal to it to really appreciate it. The story of the pillar and the apprentice of the master mason and everything
Hmm.
else. And I do think that something special was found by the Templars during one of the raids or when they left Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Yep, I don't know what it was. I think it was something that was obviously worth great monetary value. They left that, what I call a message written in stone. If you know how to read their messages, Rosslyn Chapel must look like some kind of holy textbook.
Hmm.
And there's one part of the ceiling that's got 216 stone blocks in it.
Hmm.
Each of them has been found to represent a different cymatic frequency. There's a pattern on them. And if you're into cymatics and you put frequency through a board and you put sand on it, every frequency has a unique pattern that it makes.
Hmm.
So you've even had people coming in there looking at that and making pieces of musical work from this message that's encoded in stone. We think we've decoded it and we think we know what we're looking at, but only the Templars that put it there and the Sinclairs probably, they'll
Hmm.
know. As for the Oak Island thing, I don't think you can get away from a Templar connection.
Yeah,
I
I
really
think
don't.
you're right.
Yeah.
I have looked into the Oak Island mystery for almost 2 decades now. I actually went up there about 20 years ago. But anyway, I was fascinated with people looking for the treasure at first, but then I really started getting into the history. And of course, with the Sinclairs and the Templars, and like you said, most likely they found something in Jerusalem uh, at the Temple Mount, or where or the old temple was, where
Yeah.
Solomon's temple was.
Yeah. Down beneath Solomon's temple, they were mining in there. So who knows what they.
Yeah, who knows what they found? I mean, they say it's possibly the Ark of the Covenant, or maybe the gold menorah that was in Solomon's tomb. Who knows? But I don't think that's the only thing. I think if they did take the trouble after the purge and come over and travel here to North America, I'm quite sure they brought more than that with them.
Yeah.
There are people
Absolutely.
that have talked about maybe Shakespeare's manuscripts are there. Maybe there's something else. I think something is there now.
I'm the
Just
same as you,
because,
Lon. I
yeah,
think y- they would have been people in the know would have known that there was a something going on if they were connected through the right kind of brothers, people they knew, maybe they had heard about this operation, this because it must have taken them years to do what
Oh
they've
yeah.
done at Oak Island. So somebody like Sir Francis Drake, his writings. I'm like you. I think it might have been a couple of journeys. There might have been a whole heap of different stuff stashed there. But my question to you would be: do you think there's anything still there, or
Well,
do you
that's
think,
just it. You know,
yeah,
I don't know. My honest opinion, I don't think there is. There may be remnants of something, but they had dug all over that island, and quite frankly, if they should have hit the vault by now if that vault is actually there. Now, of course, they're going off on tangents and other things. They're finding historical evidence. That if it was the Templars, there were more than just the Templars there. I'm quite sure there were Spanish pirates there. There were
I've
the
even
French
looked
were
at it,
there.
the Vikings. They could have been there.
Sure, they could have been
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
It's not beyond you know the pay. I mean, it's not beyond the actual theory of them being there because we know the Vikings were in Vinland around the 11th century. So yeah, who knows what's there? I kind of got stuck on that show. I hated to do that because it seems like you got strung on every year. It's what? How many? I don't know how
I'm an
many years
addict.
they've been doing
I
this
am an
now.
addict, Lon. It's terrible. I sit there waiting for every episode, and you're right. They keep you hanging. And I tell you what, the guys that have got it, Rick and Marty Laguna, I think they're in it for the right reason. They're already
Mm,
millionaires. I think they enjoy the history as much as they enjoy the actual treasure hunt.
I think you're right, and
Yeah,
that's the part of it I enjoy
yeah,
because I really like to know what they find as far as history wise. If they never find a piece of gold, I don't care.
yeah. And I
But
don't think they do either. And I think that's probably the best type of people to have the island because they really look like they respect it. I don't
yeah,
know. They're a couple. I'd like to get them. I'd like to have a chat with them one day. Put it that way. That's for sure.
yeah, I would probably like to get them. I don't know how much problem it would be to get them on the show, but they'd be a good interview.
Oh, great.
But no,
Yeah,
I'm with you. I think the history is the most fascinating part about it.
yeah.
And our history in North America is not that long, and whatever we can find that connects to the old world, connects to Great Britain, and the countries of United Kingdom and such. That's just fine with me because I love history. Period.
And I
So
mean, you're talking about Oak Island, Nova Scotia, New
yeah.
Scotland. I mean, when we were in the military, when we went over to MacDill Air Force Base,
Oh,
we spent
you were at MacDill? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, we spent a night up in Canada, Nova Scotia, and I swear it was like something out of I don't know what it was like because I don't know what I was expecting. But when we got there, it was all Scottish flags, and I'm thinking, right, I know it's called Nova Scotia, but I had no
Mhm.
idea just how proud of the Scottish connections that the people had there. I mean, we were only there one night on the way there, one night on the way back, but I tell you what, wow, what people, so welcoming, and like a
Yeah.
little home away from home, it really was. And when you had an accent like this, you didn't have to put your hand in your pocket all night. So, bonus.
Yeah, I'll have to talk to you someday about the Bigfoot habituation I was involved with up in northern Nova Scotia. We've had some pretty interesting cases from up there. I'll have to forward that to you one day. And yeah, Nova Scotia is pretty cool.
Yeah,
New Scotland,
yeah.
it's pretty cool. When people think of Nova Scotia, they think about Cajuns and French and such. Well, it's not like that. That whole maritimes of Canada are quite interesting. My dad spent time in the Air Force up there as well,
Got you.
Yeah, he was in Labrador, Goose Bay, and of course
That's where we came in. That's where we actually came in. Goose.
it is it. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So yeah, he was with Strategic Air Command, and yeah, actually his commander was Paul Tibbets, and during when he was during Korea. So yeah, he was with the 509th, the same bomber group that was at Roswell, and I have had the fortune of being able to talk to a lot of guys that were out there at the time who remained in the group, and I've been to reunions and stuff. It's interesting. They don't say a whole lot. My father was pretty tight-lipped about that stuff too. He really honored his disclosure agreement with the government.
That's why I always kind of tell people to be very wary when you get whistleblowers turning up on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like Lon is saying here, these people, they're not the kind of people that tell tales. You don't get into these positions if you're the type of person that has loose tongue. So, yeah, it makes sense to me, Lon, hearing you say that they don't really talk about it, because that's what I would expect, from proper military.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just the way it is. I mean, he honored that all the time. I mean, I know he was in the reserves when I was very young, and he used to actually, when NASA first started down in Huntsville, Alabama, he was actually down there as well doing some things. So yeah, I mean, it's they do it. A lot of these guys honor that, and when you hear about these ex-military telling you about this and that as far as UFOs and stuff, I take it with a grain of salt for the most part.
Yep.
I don't necessarily buy into all that because I know the culture, and the culture, so you know how that is.
Yep, I learned the hard way, buying into all of it at the beginning, and then slowly picking apart these people that I'd put on pedestals and thought, oh no. But that's how you learn. That's how you learn. Over here in the UK, we've got the 40th anniversary of the Rendlesham Forest incident coming up. That's like our Roswell,
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, that's an enigma on itself. It really is.
Yeah. 40 years later, it still gets so much, or there is so much controversy still around it. That for me, the fact that there's still people arguing over in it, no smoke without fire. There's something at the core of that story that people don't want you to know about,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. So, Kev, before we go tonight, why don't you tell the folks about your shows and go ahead and advertise what you do and so how they can connect with you.
You can find me here on YouTube. I'm on TFR Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday on the Kev Baker Show, 5 p.m. in EST. It's on for 2 hours. We get authors coming on, sometimes scientists, real people, just like ordinary listeners as well. Cover everything from geopolitics to exopolitics, but I prefer to do the stuff like Lon does. This is the stuff that really genuinely interests me and excites me, so it's easier to get into and be enthusiastic about. But we cover the election shenanigans, anything, everything. We'll talk about it. And head on over, find me at tfrlive.com or here on YouTube.
Well, Kev, I want to thank you for spending the time with us, staying up. I have been on your show.
It's been great.
I have been on your show. It's a great show. I love it. I plan on coming back again sometime, and I definitely want you to come back as well.
Oh, I most certainly will, brother. Anything that goes on in Scotland, I'll be your man on the ground, right? You can
that
come.
That sounds good to me.
All right, my man.
You have a good evening, and I'll talk to you later.
Thank you, Lon. Bye-bye.
Take care. Now, if you have an unexplained encounter or sighting, feel free to contact me through the Phantoms of Monsters blog site. If you're interested in supporting Phantoms of Monsters and Arcane Radio, you can use the PayPal donation buttons or links on the blog and newsletter. Our YouTube channel, Beyond Explanation, has new content being added almost daily. We've got several radio shows that are archived, live and archived there. We've got actually right now we've got 4 shows that are going to be, one's going to be starting in January. We got Jack Harry, Paranormal Planet, and Amy Boo's Beyond Blue Yonder that are actually streaming now. So check them out. And when you go to the Beyond Explanation, make sure to subscribe. And a little bit of word of mouth wouldn't hurt either. So I want to again thank Kev Baker for joining me this evening. And I want to thank you for listening to the show. Stay healthy, have a safe and enjoyable weekend. Good night.